The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web that few fully understand and fewer still can master. But the galaxy is not the only place where power moves through the dark between stars. Somewhere beyond the reach of any star chart the Jedi archives had ever cataloged, another kind of warrior tradition had been forged in blood, honor, and unforgiving genetic law. And on the night the sky above Christophsis tore itself open, those two traditions were about to collide. The Clone Wars had been raging for the better part of 2 standard years. The Republic bled credits and clone lives in equal measure across 1,000 systems, while the Confederacy of Independent Systems pressed its droid armies into every gap the overstretched Jedi Order left behind. Christophsis, jewel-bright and crystalline, had already seen its share of war. What it had not seen, what nothing in this galaxy had ever seen, was the sky ripping open above its northern hemisphere in a burst of gravitic distortion that had no resemblance to any hyperspace signature ever logged by Republic or Separatist sensors alike. Ahsoka Tano felt it before she saw it. She was 17 standard years old, 3 years into her apprenticeship under Anakin Skywalker, and by now she trusted her instincts more than she trusted most sensor readouts. She was standing on the forward deck of a Republic gunship, escorting a supply convoy through contested airspace, when the disturbance rolled through the Force like a stone dropped into still water. Not violent, not dark exactly, just wrong, in a way she had no reference point for. "You feel that?" she asked, not looking away from the horizon. Beside her, Anakin's voice crackled over the comm from his own fighter. "Feel what?" "I don't know." She frowned, reaching further, the way Master Plo Koon had taught her, not grasping, just listening. Something just arrived, somewhere close. She was not wrong. 400 kilometers above the planet's surface, space itself buckled inward and then outward again, a wound tearing open and sealing shut in the same violent instant. What fell through that wound was not a Separatist dreadnought or a stray comet. It was a jump ship, sleek, asymmetrical, its hull a patchwork of gray ceramic armor that belonged to no shipwright's design the galaxy had ever seen, and trailing behind it in a loose defensive formation for dropships, their cargo bays sealed tight around cargo that would soon change everything. Inside the lead dropship, Star Colonel Karensky Van of Clan Wolf pulled himself up from the crash restraints and spat blood onto the deck plating. Around him, his cluster's technicians were already shouting damage reports in a clipped, efficient cant of clan military speech, a language built for precision, not comfort. The jump had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong. Their navigational computer had registered a gravitic anomaly during what should have been a routine transit through contested inner sphere space, and instead of arriving at their intended coordinates, they had been thrown somewhere else entirely, somewhere the star charts made no sense. Somewhere the sensor logs were already flagging thousands of unfamiliar signals, energy weapons, shielded warships, and something the scientist cast's readings could only describe, with visible confusion, as a biological energy field of unknown origin, permeating all detected life signs. Karensky did not know what the Force was. He did not care, not yet. What he cared about was that his cluster, barely 2 Trinera strong, 5 Omnimechs and their support elements, cut off from clan space, with no functioning jumpship drive and no way home, had just fallen into the middle of someone else's war. "Assessment," he barked, wiping blood from his lip. 2 major military powers in local conflict. His second, Star Captain Ravana, reported from the tactical station, her voice flat with the discipline of her caste. Preliminary scans show energy signatures consistent with organized warfare across multiple star systems. "We are not the first outsiders to arrive uninvited, Star Colonel. This galaxy is already killing itself quite efficiently." Karensky allowed himself something close to a grim smile. In clan society, there was no shame in finding oneself stranded, only in failing to act with honor once stranded. And if this galaxy was already a battlefield, then a battlefield was something the clans understood better than any other people in existence. "Then we will introduce ourselves," he said, "the way clan warriors always have, in combat and on our terms." Ahsoka's gunship reached the crash site 3 hours later, alongside 2 squads of clone troopers under Captain Rex's command. The debris field told a strange story. No droid wreckage, no separatist markings, but enormous scorched furrows gouged into the crystalline plain, each one nearly 30 meters long, as if something massive had walked away from the impact site under its own power. "Not our tech," Rex said, crouching beside one of the furrows, running a gloved hand along its melted edge. "Not separatist either. Commander, I don't like this." Ahsoka didn't answer right away. She was reaching out again, carefully, the way she'd learned. The force around this place felt strange, not dark, not corrupted, but distant, like trying to hear a voice through several layers of transparent steel. Whatever had crashed here carried something that made the force itself go quiet. That was when the first battle mech rose out of the treeline. It stood nearly 12 meters tall, humanoid in silhouette, but armored like something between a war god and a walking fortress. Matte gray plating scarred with the wolf's head insignia of its clan, twin laser arrays mounted where shoulders would be, a heavy autocannon slung beneath one massive forearm. Steam vented from its joints in the cold Christophsis air. Its cockpit canopy caught the twin sun's light like a single baleful eye. "Blaster cannons," Rex shouted, already moving his squad into defensive positions. "Cover." Ahsoka ignited both lightsabers in the same motion, dropping into a ready stance, every instinct screaming that this was a war machine built for exactly the kind of devastation the Separatists specialized in. But something in the Force nagged at her, insistent and strange. This wasn't Separatist aggression. It was something else. Something watching, assessing, the way a predator sizes up an unfamiliar rival, rather than simply attacking prey. The battle mecha's external speakers crackled to life, and a voice, clipped, precise, utterly, without fear, echoed across the crystalline plain. "Unidentified combatants. You have entered a contested zone. State your affiliation, or be judged unworthy of further parley." Rex exchanged a glance with Ahsoka. "That's new." "Republic." Ahsoka called back, lightsabers still raised, mind racing. Whatever piloted that machine spoke basic, or something close enough that the Force was bridging the gap, translating meaning the way it sometimes did between species who had never shared a word in their lives. "We're not your enemy. We didn't even know you were here." A long pause. The battle mecha's massive head unit tilted, servos whining, as if genuinely considering her words. "You wield strange weapons," the voice finally replied, "and something else besides. Energy I do not recognize, radiating from your very being. Interesting." Another pause, heavier this time. "I am Star Colonel Karensky Van of Clan Wolf. We are not of this galaxy, and we did not choose to arrive here. But we will not apologize for defending ourselves, nor for taking what advantage this new world offers a warrior people with nowhere left to call home." Ahsoka felt something shift in the Force, then, not danger exactly, but possibility, vast and unformed, the way a single choice can bend the shape of everything that follows. She lowered her sabers, just slightly, though she did not extinguish them. "Then, maybe," she said slowly, "we should talk before anyone else decides for us." Behind her, Rex's grip tightened on his blaster, and far above in orbit, the Republic sensors had already begun screaming warnings to every command post in the sector. Whatever had just fallen out of the sky above Christophsis, the galaxy would never be quite the same again. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. The standoff on the crystalline plain held for exactly 11 seconds, long enough for the twin suns to catch on scored metal, long enough for Rex to signal his squad into a defensive perimeter without breaking eye contact with the towering war machine, long enough for Ahsoka to believe, for one fragile moment, that this could be resolved without bloodshed. Then the second battle mech emerged from the ridge above them, and everything came apart at once. It was smaller than Karensky's machine, faster, built along leaner lines, with twin missile racks mounted across its shoulders like folded wings. It did not announce itself. It did not offer parley. It simply opened fire. A spread of missiles arcing down toward the clone trooper's position with a shriek that split the cold air. "Down," Rex bellowed, and his squad scattered as the first volley slammed into the crystalline ground. throwing up a curtain of shattered stone and superheated vapor. Ahsoka reacted on instinct, throwing herself between the blast radius and two troopers who hadn't cleared in time, her sabers a blur as she deflected fragments of shrapnel that would have shredded flesh and armor alike. Through the smoke, she caught a glimpse of Kerensky's machine wheeling toward the newcomer, one massive arm raised, not in aggression, she realized with a jolt, but in clear, unmistakable command. Star Captain Ravana, hold fire. This was not sanctioned. Whatever Ravana's answer was, it came in the form of another missile spread, this one aimed squarely at Kerensky's own machine. The message was unmistakable even without translation. Not every clan warrior agreed that diplomacy was the correct opening move. They're fighting each other? Rex shouted over the chaos, dragging a wounded trooper back behind a ridge of broken crystal. I don't think that's the plan, Ahsoka called back, watching Kerensky's machine take the hit across its shoulder plating and stagger, venting steam and sparks. I think that's a disagreement. She had no more time to consider the political complexities of whatever culture these war machines belonged to, because Ravenous Mech had turned its attention, and its remaining missile racks, toward the Republic troops. Ahsoka didn't wait to find out whether this was a targeting error or a deliberate escalation. She moved. She crossed the open ground in a series of force-assisted leaps that ate up the distance in seconds, lightsabers held low, reading the machine's movements the way she'd learned to read a duelist's stance, the subtle shift of weight, the tell before the strike. When Ravenous Mech pivoted its autocannon arm toward her, tracking with mechanical precision, Ahsoka was already inside its minimum engagement range, using the force to hurl herself up along its armored leg, one saber biting into a joint seam where servo met armor plate. The mech screamed, an awful grinding shriek of tortured metal, and staggered, its balance systems fighting to compensate. Inside the cockpit, Star Captain Ravana felt the impact through her neurohelmet's feedback and swore in a way that would have scandalized her genetic engineers. No blade should have been able to reach that joint. No blade should have been able to move that fast. She had trained her entire life against Mechwarriors, against infantry with man-portable weapons, against the occasional elemental battle armor in trials gone wrong. She had never trained against this. Report, Kerensky's voice snapped across the clan command channel, sharp with the particular fury of a commander whose orders had just been ignored. Ravana, stand down. That is a direct order. She's not one of us, Star Colonel, Ravana snarled back, wrenching her mech's controls to bring her weapons to bear on the strange, impossibly fast creature that had just crippled one of her leg actuators. She fights like an elemental crossed with something out of a nightmare. I will not stand idle while she... Ahsoka didn't hear the rest. She was already moving again, dropping clear of the wounded mech's collapsing frame before it could crush her beneath its own falling bulk, rolling to her feet in a crouch just as Rex's squad opened up with concentrated blaster fire, aiming for sensor arrays and joint mechanisms the way they'd been trained to disable droid units 3 times their size. For a moment, it looked like Christophsis's crystalline plane was about to become the site of a full-pitched battle. Clone troopers, Jedi Padawan, and 2 clan battle mechs locked in a 3-way engagement that none of them had chosen and none of them fully understood. Then Kerensky's mech did something none of them expected. He stepped bodily between Ravenous' crippled machine and the Republic forces, weapons lowered, armored hands raised in a gesture that transcended species and technology alike. The universal language of enough. This engagement is concluded, he announced, his voice carrying an authority that made even Ravenous Mech go still, weapons humming but not firing. Star Captain Ravana has acted without sanction and will answer for it before the Clan Council, should we ever find our way home to answer to one. As for you, the mech's sensor array turned toward Ahsoka, who stood amid the smoke and wreckage with both sabers still raised, breathing hard. You fought with more skill than any infantry combatant I have witnessed in 20 years of service. I would know your name, warrior, before this misunderstanding costs either of our peoples more than it already has. Ahsoka hesitated. Every instinct honed by 3 years at Anakin's side told her this was exactly the kind of situation the Jedi Code warned against. Engaging with an unknown, potentially hostile power without council sanction, without backup, without a clear read on their intentions beyond a single tense exchange of words and violence. But there was something in the way Kerensky had stepped between his own subordinate and her allies, something in the blunt, uncompromising honesty of this engagement is concluded that struck her as fundamentally different from the layered deceptions she'd grown used to navigating in Republic politics. "Ahsoka Tano," she said finally, extinguishing her sabers but not clipping them away. "Jedi Padawan, Grand Army of the Republic." "Kerensky Van," the Mex pilot replied, "Star Colonel, Clan Wolf. Formerly of the Jade Falcon Shadow, before our exile to the clan homeworlds, a history that means nothing to you, and everything to me. We did not come to this galaxy of your republic by choice, Ahsoka Tano. We came by accident, through a rupture in space that our own science does not fully comprehend. We have no home to return to, no supply lines, no reinforcements beyond what fell through that rift with us. What we have is honor and skill, and machines built to survive where lesser warriors would perish." Behind him, Ravana's damaged mech had gone silent, its pilot listening through gritted teeth to a conversation she clearly considered beneath her station. Rex had made his way to Ahsoka's side, blaster still trained on the towering machines, but no longer firing. "Commander," he said quietly, "Republic Command is going to want a full report on this. 2 unregistered war machines, capable of taking a saber strike and walking away, no separatist markings, no known affiliation." "I know, Rex." Ahsoka kept her eyes on Kerensky's mech, on the strange, unreadable calm radiating from its pilot even through layers of armor plating and translated speech. "But I don't think they're our enemy. Not yet, anyway. And if the Council disagrees?" That was the question, wasn't it? Ahsoka thought of Anakin, still holding position in orbit, waiting for her report. She thought of Council, cautious and deliberate as always, weighing every unknown variable against the war's already stretched resources. She thought of how easily this could spiral, a stranded warrior culture, desperate and dangerous, colliding with a galaxy already tearing itself apart. "Then we'll have a very difficult conversation," she said. "But right now I want answers. Colonel Van," she raised her voice, addressing the towering machine directly, "if you're willing to stand down and talk, truly talk, I think we can find a way through this without more bloodshed. But I need to know exactly what you and your people intend to do, now that you're here." For a long moment, the only sound was wind moving across broken crystal, and the distant hum of Ravana's damaged mech venting excess heat into the cold air. "That," Kerensky said finally, "is a fair question, deserving of a fair answer. Very well, Jedi Padawan. Let us talk, clan to republic, warrior to warrior. But know this, we did not survive the trials of our own homeworlds by trusting easily, and we will not begin trusting now simply because you fought well. Trust in clan society is earned through deeds, not words. If you wish to understand us, you may find yourself tested in ways your Jedi Order has never prepared you for." Ahsoka held his gaze, or what she imagined was his gaze, somewhere behind that armored cockpit glass, and felt something settle in her chest that she couldn't quite name. Curiosity, perhaps, or the first quiet stirring of a question she wasn't ready to ask herself yet. What exactly was she willing to risk, to understand a code of honor so different from the one she'd known her entire life? "Then let's begin," she said, "with the truth. All of it." Above them, in high orbit, Republic sensor arrays continued transmitting warnings across the sector, and somewhere aboard a star destroyer holding position near Christophsis, a communications officer was already patching an urgent priority channel through to General Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker's fighter touched down on the crystalline plain 40 minutes later, kicking up a spray of shattered stone as he brought it in hard and fast, the way he did everything. He was out of the cockpit before the repulsors had fully cycled down, one hand already resting on his lightsaber hilt, eyes sweeping the wreckage-strewn battlefield with the particular intensity he reserved for situations where his Padawan had been involved in something he hadn't personally cleared first. Snips. His voice carried across the plane, equal parts relief and irritation. "You want to explain to me why Republic Command is telling me there are 2 12-meter war machines sitting on a Christophsis battlefield that don't match anything in the Separatist inventory? Because there are two 12-meter war machines sitting on a Christophsis battlefield that don't match anything in the Separatist inventory, Ahsoka said, falling into step beside him as he approached the makeshift perimeter Rex's squad had established around the crash site. Master, they're not with the Separatists. They're not with anyone. They just arrived. From somewhere else entirely. Anakin's eyebrows rose. Somewhere else. Colonel Van called it a rupture in space. Not hyperspace, something different. His people are called the clans. They're stranded here, no way home, no reinforcements. She hesitated, choosing her next words carefully, aware of how they would sound to a general already stretched thin by a war on a dozen fronts. I think they could be valuable allies if we approach this the right way. Or a Separatist trick, Anakin said, though without real conviction. He'd seen the sensor logs too, and nothing about the readings matched Dooku's usual patchwork of stolen and improvised technology. Or something worse. You know how this looks, right? Unregistered war machines with weapons that can shred infantry and shrug off blaster fire, appearing out of nowhere in contested space, during a war we're already losing ground in. I know how it looks, Ahsoka agreed. I also know how it feels. Master, there's nothing dark about them. Nothing hidden. Whatever the clans are, they don't lie about who they are or what they want. Colonel Van told me flat out, they didn't come here to conquer us. They came here because they had no other choice, and now they're trying to figure out how to survive. Anakin studied her for a long moment, and Ahsoka recognized the particular flavor of his silence, not disagreement exactly, but the weighing calculation of a man who'd learned, through hard experience, that first impressions in this war were rarely the whole story. Before he could respond, the ground trembled beneath their boots as Karensky's battle mech, repaired enough to stand, though still trailing thin streams of coolant vapor from its damaged shoulder joint, approached the perimeter, servos whining with each massive step. General Skywalker, I presume. Karensky's voice crackled over external speakers, translated with the same strange fluency the Force had lent his earlier words. Your Padawan speaks highly of Republic diplomacy. I confess I have seen little evidence of it beyond her own conduct. Anakin's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone level. You'll forgive me if I'm not in a hurry to trust a war machine that opened fire on my troops less than an hour ago. That engagement was unsanctioned, Karensky said, and something in his tone shifted, harder now, the words carrying the weight of genuine anger. Star Captain Ravana acted against direct orders and will face judgment for it. Clan judgment, which I promise you is neither gentle nor forgiving. But I did not come here to apologize for one warrior's impatience. I came to determine whether there is a path forward that does not end in further bloodshed between our peoples. And if there isn't, Karensky's mech went very still, the kind of stillness that felt, even through layers of armor and machinery, like a held breath. Then we will do what clan warriors have always done when faced with annihilation or exile. We will fight for the right to exist on our own terms until the last of U.S. falls. I would prefer that outcome for no one, General Skywalker, but I will not pretend the option does not exist. The honesty of it landed harder than any threat could have. Ahsoka watched Anakin's expression shift, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. The particular look he got when an enemy said something that made too much sense to dismiss outright. There's another option, Ahsoka said quietly, stepping forward before either of them could escalate further. Colonel Van, you told me trust in your culture is earned through deeds, not words. What would it take? What would actually convince your people that the Republic isn't your enemy? For a long moment, Karensky's mech simply stood there, steam venting softly into the cold air. Then, unexpectedly, the cockpit hatch hissed open, and a figure began climbing down the machine's armored flank, tall, lean, moving with the controlled economy of someone who had spent a lifetime being tested and had learned to waste no motion. Karensky Van in the flesh wore a close-fitted flight suit of gray and silver, his scalp shaved in the manner Ahsoka would later learn marked certain clan warrior castes, his face bearing the kind of scars that came not from carelessness, but from a society that considered visible evidence of survived combat a mark of honor rather than shame. A trial, he said simply, looking directly at Ahsoka now rather than at Anakin. In clan society, trust and status are not granted by rank or birthright alone. They are earned through combat, structured and honorable, witnessed and judged. You fought well against Star Captain Ravenous Mech, Ahsoka Tano, better than I believed possible for someone your size, wielding nothing but blades of focused light. I propose a trial of position, formal, sanctioned, judged by my remaining officers. Should you prevail, I will personally vouch for the Republic's good faith to what remains of my command structure, and we will discuss terms of coexistence, perhaps even alliance as equals. And if I lose? Ahsoka asked. Then you will have lost nothing but the trial itself. We are not so barbaric as your propaganda might paint us, Padawan. Death is not the stake here. Respect is. Trials of position are conducted to first blood, or to clear technical superiority. I would test your skill, not end your life. Anakin's hand tightened on Ahsoka's shoulder before she could answer. Snips, this isn't your call to make alone. Council protocol. Council protocol didn't account for a stranded warrior civilization falling out of the sky. Ahsoka said, meeting his eyes. Master, I trust my instincts here. I felt it in the Force the moment we made contact. There's no deception in him. No hidden agenda. Just a code, and a people trying to survive by it. If I can earn that trust honestly, we might avoid a war we can't afford to fight, on top of the one we're already losing. Anakin held her gaze for a long moment, and Ahsoka could see the calculation running behind his eyes. The general weighing tactical necessity, the former slave weighing another culture's claim to honor and freedom, and beneath both of those, simply her master, weighing the safety of his apprentice against a stranger's word. If this goes wrong, he said finally, low enough that only she could hear, I'm not standing by and watching. I know. She managed a small smile. I wouldn't expect you to. The trial was arranged with unnerving speed and formality. A wide, cleared circle marked out on the crystalline plane by clan technicians who moved with the brisk efficiency of people who had conducted this ritual 1,000 times before, on worlds far from this one. Star Captain Ravana, her damaged mech now grounded for repairs, stood among the small cluster of surviving clan officers who gathered to witness, her expression unreadable behind a fresh bruise along her jaw. Punishment, Ahsoka realized, for her unsanctioned attack, delivered by her own commander with the same blunt directness that governed everything else about these people. Kerensky himself would serve as her opponent, not in his battle mech this time, but in what he called elemental configuration, a suit of powered battle armor that stood roughly 3 meters tall, still dwarfing Ahsoka, but human enough in shape that the contest would be, in his words, a fair test of skill rather than a demonstration of technological advantage. First blood or clear submission, Ravana announced, apparently serving as arbiter despite, or perhaps because of her earlier disgrace, her voice carrying the same rigid formality that seemed woven into every aspect of clan ritual. Weapons as declared. Colonel Van has chosen close combat configuration, foregoing ranged armaments as a mark of respect for his opponent's chosen weapons. Do both combatants accept these terms? Accepted, Kerensky said, servos hissing as the powered armor settled into a ready stance. Ahsoka drew both lightsabers, the twin blades snap hissing to life in the cold air, and felt the familiar clarity settle over her. The same focus Anakin had taught her. The same calm master, Plo Koon, had shown her how to find beneath pressure. Around the circle, clone troopers stood alongside clan warriors, an uneasy audience united only by their shared uncertainty about what they were witnessing. Accepted, she said. Ravana raised one hand, then dropped it. Begin. Kerensky moved first, and moved fast, far faster than his armor's bulk suggested was possible, closing the distance in 2 explosive strides, one massive armored fist swinging in an arc that would have ended the contest in a single blow had it connected. Ahsoka read the telegraph in his shoulder a fraction of a second before the strike came, dropping low and rolling beneath the swing, coming up inside his guard with both sabers angled to test, not to wound. Not yet, just to test the armor's actual limits. The blade scored bright lines across the powered suit's chest plating without penetrating, and Kerensky's return strike caught her a glancing blow across the shoulder that sent her stumbling backward. pain blooming bright and immediate even through the force-assisted reflexes that had let her partially deflect the worst of it. "You are fast," Kerensky said, and there was something almost like genuine pleasure in his voice, the honest satisfaction of a warrior finally facing a worthy test. "Faster than any elemental I have trained against. But speed alone will not carry you through this, Padawan." "Wasn't planning on it," Ahsoka said through gritted teeth, and came at him again, this time not with brute force, but with the fluid, unpredictable grace of Ataru, using the Force to carry her in leaps and spins that made her nearly impossible to track, testing joint after joint, seam after seam, searching for the gaps in even the most advanced armor. The fight that followed would be spoken of in later years, by both Republic soldiers and clan warriors alike, as something extraordinary not because of who won, but because of what it revealed about the strange, unlikely respect that could be forged between two utterly different traditions of combat, when both sides fought with honesty and skill rather than deception and desperation. And somewhere in the Force, watching it all unfold, Ahsoka felt something shifting. Not just her understanding of these strange new warriors from beyond the stars, but her understanding of herself, and the paths that might yet open before her, should she choose to walk them. The trial ended not in a single decisive blow, but in a moment of mutual exhaustion that both combatants recognized simultaneously. Ahsoka's saber angled against the vulnerable seam at Kerensky's throat guard. His armored gauntlet closed around her wrist hard enough to bruise, both of them breathing hard, neither able to press the advantage further without crossing from contest into genuine harm. "Enough," Ravana called. And there was something different in her voice now, not the flat contempt of before, but a grudging, unmistakable respect. Clear stalemate. Neither combatant achieved decisive advantage. "The trial is concluded." Kerensky released her wrist and stepped back, his powered armor venting excess heat in soft hisses, and when he spoke again, the formal cadence of the ritual had given way to something more genuinely warm. "I have fought elementals with 20 years more experience who could not match what you just demonstrated, Ahsoka Tano. Whatever your Jedi order teaches you, it teaches you well." "You're not so bad yourself," she said, deactivating her sabers and pressing a hand to her bruised shoulder, though she couldn't fully suppress the grin tugging at her mouth. There was something exhilarating about a fight that asked nothing of her except her own skill. No hidden agenda, no political calculation. Just two warriors testing each other honestly and walking away with respect intact. Anakin crossed the circle before the last of the clan witnesses had finished dispersing, his expression a complicated mixture of relief and something more guarded. "You all right, Snips?" "Better than all right." She rolled her shoulder, wincing slightly. "Master, I think we just found a way through this without anyone else getting hurt." "For now," Anakin said, but he was watching Kerensky with a new, more careful kind of attention, the look of a man recalibrating his assessment of a potential threat into something more like a wary respect. Kerensky removed his armored helm, revealing a face weathered by decades of combat and command, sharp-featured, with the particular stillness of someone who had learned long ago to keep his true thoughts close. "General Skywalker, your Padawan has earned what she came here to earn. I will speak on your Republic's behalf to what remains of my command, Ravana included, whether she wishes to hear it or not." A brief, pointed glance toward his subordinate, who stiffened but said nothing. "But I would ask something in return, if I may." "Depends what it is," Anakin said. "Time." Kerensky's voice carried none of the earlier formal cadence now, just plain, unvarnished honesty. "My cluster is stranded, General. We have no functioning jump ship drive, no way to signal clan space even if such a signal could somehow cross whatever divide separates your galaxy from ours. We have wounded who need tending, and warriors who will not easily accept peace with strangers who fought us within an hour of our arrival. I ask that your Republic grant us safe harbor to repair, to regroup, and to determine our place in this new world, without demanding immediate answers about where our loyalties will ultimately lie." It was, Ahsoka realized, watching the exchange with growing fascination, an extraordinarily honest request. No hidden clauses, no diplomatic doublespeak designed to extract concessions while appearing generous. Just a direct statement of need, and a direct request for help, offered without disguising the uncertainty of what might come after. That's not really my call, Anakin said carefully. That goes through the Council, through the Senate. Then let us speak with them, Kerensky said. Directly, if such a thing is possible. I would rather negotiate honestly with your leadership than have my people's fate decided by intermediaries who were not present for what has already passed between us today. Anakin glanced at Ahsoka, some silent question passing between them, and she gave a small nod, not because she was certain this was the right path, but because everything in the Force told her that turning these stranded warriors away, or worse, treating them as enemies to be neutralized rather than people to be understood, would be a mistake with consequences far beyond this single battlefield. I'll relay the request, Anakin said finally. No promises. The Council's going to want a lot more than my word and my Padawan's instincts before they grant safe harbor to an unregistered military force with weapons that can level city blocks. That is fair, Kerensky said. I would expect nothing less from a functioning command structure. We will hold position here, tend our wounded, and await your Council's judgment. The Council chamber, 3 days later, was not kind to the proposal. Ahsoka stood beside Anakin in the holographic circle, watching as Master Windu's projection paced with barely contained agitation, while Master Yoda sat in contemplative stillness, and Obi-Wan Kenobi's projection flickered slightly with the strain of a poor transmission from the Outer Rim front, where he'd been fighting for the better part of a week. An unregistered military force, Windu said, with weapons capable of leveling infantry positions and shrugging off blaster fire. And you propose we grant them safe harbor within Republic space, based on nothing more than a ritual combat and a Padawan's assessment of their character? With respect, Master Windu, Ahsoka said, keeping her voice level despite the flare of frustration in her chest. Everything they've told us has proven accurate. Everything they've done has matched their word exactly. Colonel Van could have ordered a full assault the moment we made contact. Instead, he stood down his own subordinate for acting without sanction, and he's asked for nothing but time to determine his people's place here. That's not the behavior of an enemy planning deception. Or, Windu countered, it is the behavior of a very patient enemy, playing a longer game than we yet understand. There's a third possibility, Master Yoda said quietly, and the chamber fell silent in the particular way it always did when the ancient master chose to speak. Truth, this could simply be. Strange to us, their ways are. Deceptive does not mean they must be. He turned his gaze, even through hologram, somehow piercing, toward Ahsoka. Felt this in the Force, you have, young Tano? Yes, Master. She met his eyes without flinching. There's nothing hidden about them. No deception, no manipulation. It's almost disorienting, honestly. I keep waiting for the other half of the plan to reveal itself, and it never does. They just say what they mean and do what they say. A brief, charged silence settled over the chamber. Ahsoka understood, without anyone saying it directly, that her words carried an implicit contrast that everyone present could not help but register. A contrast to the layered political maneuvering that increasingly defined the Republic's own conduct of this war, the classified orders and redacted mission briefings, and the growing unease among certain Jedi about decisions being made above their clearance that didn't always survive close scrutiny. The war effort, Obi-Wan's flickering projection said carefully, cannot easily absorb an unknown variable of this magnitude, Council or no. If these clans prove hostile after we've granted them safe harbor, we will have handed the Separatists, or worse, a devastating advantage. And if we turn them away, Ahsoka said, and they decide reasonably that a galaxy unwilling to offer basic sanctuary to stranded refugees is a galaxy worth conquering rather than negotiating with? Master Kenobi, they're not asking for territory. They're not asking for military support against the Separatists. They're asking for time to repair and regroup, nothing more. For now, Windu said pointedly. For now, Ahsoka agreed, is all any of us can ever really promise in the middle of a war. But I'd rather extend good faith to people who've earned it through honest conduct than assume the worst of everyone who arrives on our doorstep out of desperation rather than malice. The debate stretched on for the better part of an hour, circling through tactical assessments and political ramifications and the ever-present specter of Palpatine's Emergency Powers Act, which had granted the Chancellor increasingly broad authority to make unilateral decisions about exactly this kind of situation without full council consultation, a fact that unsettled Ahsoka more than she let herself dwell on, given how conveniently it might resolve the entire question, and how little say the Jedi Order might ultimately have in the outcome. In the end, the Council granted a provisional accord. The clan cluster would be permitted to hold position on a designated neutral world, monitored by Republic forces, forbidden from engaging in any hostile action against either Republic or Separatist assets, with full status to be re-evaluated after 90 standard days. It was, Ahsoka understood, the diplomatic equivalent of holding someone at careful arm's length while pretending the gesture was an embrace. When she relayed the terms to Kerensky personally, standing once more on the crystalline plane where they'd first tested each other's mettle, his expression remained carefully neutral, though something in his eyes suggested he understood exactly what the accord's careful wording actually meant. 90 days of watching us for signs of betrayal, he said, dressed in the language of provisional hospitality. Your council does not trust easily, Ahsoka Tano. No, she admitted. They don't. But it's a start. And for what it's worth, I trust you. Whatever happens next, I don't think that's going to change easily. Kerensky studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his weathered features, calculation, perhaps, or the first stirring of something closer to genuine regard. That is worth more than you know, in a galaxy this large and this indifferent to a single-stranded warrior's fate. I will hold my people to the terms of this accord, Padawan. But I will also tell you plainly, 90 days is a short time to determine whether an entire civilization, forged across centuries of trial and combat, can find a place for itself within a republic that fears what it does not understand. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried something almost like a warning wrapped in honesty. And should your republic's fear prove greater than its wisdom, I promise you this. My people did not survive the trials of our own history by accepting exile quietly a second time. The 90-day accord held, in its fragile way, for exactly 17 days before the first crack appeared. And it did not come from a clans. Ahsoka learned of it the way she learned most things she wasn't meant to know yet, by accident, catching a fragment of conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. She'd come to the makeshift Republic command post on the monitored world of Baldemnik, a rocky, sparsely inhabited planet chosen for its distance from major shipping lanes, and its usefulness as a place to keep a stranded warrior civilization conveniently out of sight, to deliver a routine supply manifest. Instead, she found two clone officers arguing in low, urgent tones over a datapad, falling silent the moment they noticed her in the doorway. Commander Tano, the senior of the two, a lieutenant she didn't recognize, straightened too quickly. Didn't realize you'd be stopping by. What's on the pad? She asked, though something in the Force already told her she wasn't going to like the answer. The two officers exchanged a glance loaded with more meaning than either seemed willing to voice aloud. Above your clearance, Commander. Command directive, routed through Coruscant. Ahsoka didn't press further, not directly. But she filed the moment away, the particular tightness in the lieutenant's shoulders, the way his eyes had flicked toward the door as though expecting someone to walk in and catch him discussing it. She'd learned, over 3 years at Anakin's side, that the things people didn't want to discuss were usually the things that mattered most. It took her 4 more days to piece together the full shape of it, and when she finally did, through a combination of careful questions to Rex, who trusted her enough to speak plainly even when official channels discouraged it, and her own growing unease in the Force whenever the subject of the clan accord arose in command briefings, the truth left her cold in a way few things had since the war began. The order had come from high above the Council's own authority, buried in an emergency powers directive that Palpatine's office had quietly issued under the justification of wartime resource security. A contingency plan, its language carefully bloodless. Should the clan cluster's technology prove reverse engineerable, and should the clans themselves prove resistant to full integration under Republic military command within the 90-day accord period, Republic forces were authorized to seize clan technology assets by force, framing any resulting engagement as defensive action against an unregistered hostile military presence. In other words, If the clans wouldn't hand over their battle mechs willingly, the Republic, or more precisely, the Chancellor's office, operating through channels that bypassed the Jedi Council entirely, intended to take them anyway and manufacture a justification for doing so after the fact. Ahsoka confronted Anakin with it that same evening, in the relative privacy of his quarters aboard the Resolute, unable to keep the anger from her voice even as she tried to keep her tone level. "Did you know about this?" Anakin's silence lasted a fraction of a second too long. "I heard rumors. Nothing confirmed." "Master." She stared at him, something cracking open in her chest that felt uncomfortably close to betrayal, though she couldn't yet say by whom. "This isn't a rumor. I saw the directive language myself. They're planning to manufacture a pretext to steal their technology and call it self-defense." "Ahsoka." Anakin rubbed a hand across his face, looking older in that moment than she'd ever seen him. "I don't like it either. But this is bigger than the two of us, and it's bigger than one accord with a group we've known for a matter of weeks. The war effort is running out of resources on every front. If there's a way to gain a tactical advantage that costs us nothing, but costs us nothing?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Master, we gave them our word. I gave them my word. Colonel Van trusted us, trusted me, enough to stand down his own people and request sanctuary instead of conquest. And somewhere behind our backs, Palpatine's office is already planning how to justify betraying that trust the moment it becomes convenient." Anakin didn't have a good answer for that, and his silence told her more than any words could have. She left his quarters that night with her mind made up about one thing, even if she wasn't yet certain what she intended to do about it. Whatever the Republic's leadership was planning, she would not be a party to a betrayal built on manufactured lies, dressed up in the same careful, bloodless language the Council itself had used when it debated the clan's fate 3 weeks earlier. She found Kerensky exactly where she expected to, overseeing repair work on his cluster's damaged battle mechs in the makeshift hangar Bay the Republic had grudgingly allowed them to establish on Baldemnik's rocky surface, his sleeves rolled up, hands stained with lubricant, as he worked alongside his own technicians rather than simply directing from a distance. It was, Ahsoka had come to understand over the past weeks, characteristic of him, a commander who led by example rather than decree, who considered manual labor no beneath a station, but rather another expression of the discipline his entire society was built upon. Padawantano. He didn't look up immediately from the actuator joint he was inspecting. "You have the particular expression of someone carrying news they would rather not deliver. You're perceptive. I have led warriors into battle for 20 years. Reading the weight behind someone's silence is a survival skill, not a mystical talent." He set down his tools finally, straightening to his full height, studying her face with the same careful attention he'd once brought to assessing her skill in combat. "Tell me." She told him everything. The directive, the manufactured pretext, the 90-day accord that had never been offered in genuine good faith, but as a delay tactic, while the Republic's leadership quietly prepared justification for exactly the kind of betrayal she'd promised him wouldn't come. She watched his expression shift as she spoke, from careful neutrality to something harder, colder, though notably not surprised, as if some part of him had expected exactly this outcome from the moment they'd first made contact. "You did not have to tell me this," he said, when she'd finished. "It would have been simpler, from your Republic's perspective, to let the pretext unfold as planned, and to let me learn of your government's true intentions only in the moment your soldiers arrive to seize what we've built with our own hands." "I know," Ahsoka said, "but I made you a promise. I told you I trusted you, and that whatever happened, that wasn't going to change easily. I meant it. I still mean it. Which means I couldn't stand by and let you walk into a betrayal I knew was coming, just because revealing it puts me at odds with my own government." Kerensky was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that felt, to Ahsoka, like the closing of some invisible door. "Do you understand what you have just done, Ahsoka Tano? You have chosen my people's honesty over your own Republic's authority. That is not a small thing in any society I have ever known. In clan culture, it would be considered a blood name-worthy act, a choice that defines a warrior's entire legacy, for better or worse." "I didn't do it to be honored," Ahsoka said. I did it because it was the only thing that felt right. That, Kerensky said, is precisely why it matters as much as it does. He turned to look out across the hangar bay, at his cluster's warriors working alongside their damage machines, rebuilding what they could from the wreckage of an accident that had stranded them a galaxy away from everything they'd ever known. My people have faced exile before, Padawan. Betrayal, too, in the earliest days of our founding, when the Star League's promises proved as hollow as your Republic's emergency powers directive now threatens to be. We did not survive that history by waiting patiently to be conquered a second time. What are you going to do? I do not yet know, Kerensky admitted, and there was something almost vulnerable in the honesty of it, a crack in the disciplined composure he'd maintained through every prior conversation. But I know this. I will not lead my people into a fight they cannot win against a galaxy-spanning military power, not while there remains any path toward genuine coexistence. And I will not simply hand over what remains of our strength and dignity because your government has decided, in its fear, that we are more valuable as weapons to be seized than people to be understood. He turned back to face her, and something in his expression had hardened into resolve. You have given me a warning, Ahsoka Tano, at considerable risk to yourself. I will not waste it. But understand, the path this now opens before both of us may lead somewhere neither of our people's leadership intended, and neither of us may be able to control where it ultimately ends. Ahsoka held his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her like a physical thing, the sense, unmistakable and undeniable, that she had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no simple return to the comfortable certainties of her life as a Jedi Padawan, loyal without question to a republic, and a council she was only now beginning to understand might not deserve that loyalty unconditionally. Whatever happens next, she said quietly, I meant what I told you before. I trust you, and I'd rather stand beside honesty, even when it's difficult, than comfortable silence built on lies. Word of Ahsoka's warning reached the Republic's command structure faster than either she or Kerensky had anticipated, and not through any deliberate leak. Simply through the mundane reality that a Padawan requesting extended, unsupervised access to a monitored alien encampment tended to draw attention, especially when that Padawan's own master began asking pointed questions about directives he technically shouldn't have known existed. Anakin found her 3 days later in the Baldemnik hangar bay, his expression carrying the particular tightness of a man caught between loyalty to the chain of command and loyalty to the apprentice he'd trained since she was 14 years old. Ahsoka. He kept his voice low, glancing toward the clan technicians working nearby. Command knows you tipped them off. Windows furious. There's talk of pulling you from this assignment entirely, maybe worse. Let them talk. She didn't look up from where she was helping, somewhat clumsily, by clan technical standards, but with genuine effort. Realign a damaged actuator joint on one of the smaller battle mechs, having spent the past 3 days immersing herself in the technical work of the encampment rather than waiting idle for the Republic's next move. Master, I stand by what I did. If that cost me my place in the Order, then maybe the Order's priorities have drifted further from what I believe in than I want to admit. That's not. Anakin stopped himself, jaw working. That's not a small thing to say, Snips. I know. She finally met his eyes. I've been thinking about it for days. About everything the Council's taught me, everything I believe about the Force and compassion, and doing what's right even when it's difficult. And then I watch the Republic, the government the Jedi serve, the government we're all dying for, plan to manufacture a lie to justify stealing from people who trusted us. Master, how am I supposed to reconcile that? How is any of us supposed to reconcile that? Anakin didn't have an answer, and his silence once again told her everything she needed to know about how deeply the question troubled him too, even if he wasn't yet ready to act on it the way she had. It was Kerensky who found her an hour later, after Anakin had departed for another command briefing with an expression like a man walking toward a verdict he already dreaded. The Star Colonel studied her for a long moment before speaking, and when he did, his tone carried a formality she hadn't heard from him since the day of their trial. I have consulted with what remains of my officer corps, he said, Star Captain Ravana included, despite, or perhaps because of, her earlier disgrace. She has proven, since her punishment, unexpectedly clear-eyed about the political realities we now face. We have reached a decision, Ahsoka Tano, and I would have you hear it directly from me, before rumor distorts its meaning. I'm listening. You have demonstrated, through action rather than word alone, a commitment to honesty and honor that exceeds what we have witnessed from your Republic's own leadership. In clan society, such conduct is not merely admired, it is formally recognized. I am prepared to offer you provisional trial rights within Clan Wolf's stranded command structure, not full status. That would require trials our depleted numbers cannot properly conduct, and lineage considerations your genetics could never satisfy in the traditional sense. But provisional rights, the standing to train alongside my warriors, to be considered for tactical consultation, and should circumstances demand it, to fight beside us as something more than a foreign ally. Ahsoka stared at him, the weight of the offer settling slowly, its implications unfurling in her mind faster than she could fully process them. You want me to join you? I want to offer you a choice your own society has apparently struggled to extend you honestly, Kerensky said. The choice to be judged by your conduct, not your birth, not your species, not your government's convenient fictions. I will not pretend this offer is, without complication. Some among my own people, true-born warriors bred across generations for genetic purity, will object bitterly to extending clan status, provisional or otherwise, to an outsider whose very existence would have been considered unworthy of the breeding programs that shaped us. Star Captain Ravana herself argued against this proposal for the better part of an hour, before ultimately conceding that your conduct spoke louder than her objections. And you're telling me this now, Ahsoka said slowly, right as the Republic is preparing to break its own promises to your people. I am telling you this now, Kerensky agreed, because I believe you have already begun asking yourself questions your Jedi Order's teachings cannot fully answer, questions about where true honor lies, when the institution you serve proves willing to abandon its own principles for tactical convenience. I do not ask you to abandon your order, Ahsoka Tano, nor your master, nor the beliefs that have shaped you into the warrior who defeated me, nearly, in honest combat. I ask only that you consider whether there might be a third path, beyond blind loyalty to a republic that has already shown you its willingness to lie, and beyond the isolation of standing entirely alone. The offer hung in the air between them, and Ahsoka found herself reaching for the Force the way she always did in moments of genuine uncertainty, not seeking answers exactly, but seeking clarity, the kind of stillness that let her hear her own convictions above the noise of competing loyalties. What she found, to her own quiet surprise, was not confusion, but something closer to relief. The sense of a door opening onto a path she hadn't known she was searching for until it appeared before her. I need to think, she said finally. This isn't a small thing, Colonel Van. You're asking me to stand, formally, between two peoples who might be on the verge of war with each other. That's not a choice I can make lightly, even if some part of me already knows what I want to answer. I would think less of you if you could, Kerensky said. Take the time you need. But know this. Whatever the Republic ultimately decides regarding the directive you warned me of, my people will not stand passively awaiting judgment. If war comes, I would rather have you as an ally who understands both sides than an enemy forced into a role neither of us truly wants. She told Anakin that same night, standing on the observation deck of the Resolute with Bald Demnik's rocky surface turning slowly beneath them, the words feeling strange and enormous in her mouth even as she spoke them. He offered me provisional standing, trial rights within Clan Wolf's command. Anakin went very still. Ahsoka, I haven't accepted. Not yet. But Master, she turned to face him fully, needing him to understand the weight of what she was about to say. I think I'm going to. Not to abandon the order. Not to abandon you. But because everything happening right now, the directive, the manufactured pretext, the way Palpatine's office keeps making decisions that bypass the Council entirely, it's telling me something I don't think I can keep ignoring. The Republic we're fighting for isn't the Republic we think we're fighting for. Not anymore. And I can't keep pretending that blind loyalty to an institution is the same thing as genuine honor. You don't know that accepting his offer won't drag you into a war between the Republic and the clans, Anakin said. and she could hear the fear beneath his anger now. Fear for her safety wrapped in the language of tactical caution. You don't know what it means long-term to hold status in a warrior society that fights by rules the Jedi Code was never built to accommodate. No, Ahsoka admitted. I don't know any of that for certain. But I know what I felt in the Force the moment Colonel Van made contact with us. No deception, no hidden agenda, just people trying to survive with their honor intact. And I know what I feel every time I think about the directive sitting in some classified file on Coruscant, waiting for the moment it becomes convenient to break every promise we made. She met his eyes, steady despite the tremor she could feel beneath her own composure. I have to choose something real, Master, even if it's difficult. Even if it costs me things I'm not ready to lose. Anakin was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the planet turning slowly below them, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that aged him beyond his years. I'm not going to stop you. I don't think I could even if I tried, and some part of me doesn't want to, because you're not wrong about any of it. But Ahsoka, promise me one thing. Whatever you choose, whatever this becomes, don't lose yourself in it. Don't let their code replace everything you already believe. Find a way to hold both, if you can. I'll try, she said, and meant it, though even as the words left her mouth, some quiet, honest part of her understood that the path ahead would demand choices far harder than simply holding two loyalties in careful balance. Choices that would eventually force her to decide, decisively and irrevocably, exactly where her true convictions lay. The Republic's emergency powers directive did not wait for Ahsoka to make peace with her decision. 9 days after Kerensky's offer, while she was still training alongside clan warriors in the early mornings and standing careful watch over her own uncertain conscience in the evenings, General Grievous made the decision for everyone. The Separatist fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Baldemnik without warning. 6 munificent-class frigates disgorging waves of droid dropships toward the planet's surface. And it took less than an hour for Ahsoka to understand that this was no coincidental strike. Grievous forces made straight for the clan encampment, bypassing the Republic's primary garrison entirely. And the reason became clear the moment Republic intelligence intercepted the Separatist tactical chatter. Count Dooku had learned of the stranded warriors and their unregistered technology, and where the Republic's leadership had contemplated theft dressed in bureaucratic language. The Separatists had simply decided to take what they wanted by force, then salvage whatever remained useful from the wreckage of everyone who opposed them. Multiple droid divisions inbound on clan position. Rex's voice crackled across the comm as Ahsoka sprinted through the hangar bay, both sabers already in hand. Commander, this is not a small incursion. Grievous is throwing everything he's got at this. I see them. She reached the hangar's edge in time to watch the first wave of droid gunships scream low over the ridgeline. Energy weapons already firing on the clan technicians, still working to complete repairs on the damaged battle mechs. Kerensky, the Star Colonel, was already moving, shouting orders in the clipped, efficient cant of clan command speech, warriors scrambling toward their machines with the practiced urgency of people who had trained their entire lives for exactly this moment. Battle stations. This is no drill, full engagement authorized. Ahsoka watched, in the chaos of the following minutes, something she would remember for the rest of her life. The sight of clan battle mechs, rising to meet an overwhelming droid assault, not with desperation, but with the calm, almost meditative focus of warriors who had spent generations perfecting the art of controlled violence. Kerensky's own machine, repaired now, its wolf's head insignia gleaming beneath fresh armor plating, strode into the teeth of the droid advance, twin lasers carving precise, devastating arcs through the ranks of battle droids that had no answer for weapons calibrated to punch through armor far heavier than their own plastoid shells. Ravana, flank position. Kerensky's voice carried across the battlefield even through the roar of weapons fire. Do not let them establish a foothold on the ridge. Acknowledged Star Colonel. Ravana's mech, the same machine Ahsoka had crippled during their first violent encounter, now fully repaired and bearing fresh scars from a dozen skirmishes since, pivoted with startling speed, missile racks unleashing a spread that shredded an entire squadron of droid gunships mid-flight. Ahsoka threw herself into the fray alongside Rex's squad, sabers deflecting blaster bolts back into the ranks of advancing droids, using the Force to guide her through gaps in the enemy formation that would have been invisible to anyone without her particular training. But even as she fought, she felt the shape of the larger battle taking form in the Force. The droid numbers were simply too great, wave after wave descending from the Separatist frigates faster than even the combined might of Republic and Clan forces could hope to repel indefinitely. "We need reinforcements," she shouted to Rex, ducking beneath the droideca's shield to slice through its central chassis. "Where's the rest of the garrison?" Pinned down at the primary base, Commander. Grievous split his forces, half here, half hitting the main Republic position. Command saying we're on our own until reinforcements arrive from the fleet, and that's not happening for at least another hour. An hour. Ahsoka did the calculation in the same instant Karensky's mech did, the Star Colonel's voice cutting across the clan command channel with grim clarity. "We cannot hold this position for an hour against numbers of this magnitude. Elemental units, converge on my position. We will need to consolidate our line or risk being overrun in detail." It was in that moment, watching clan warriors and Republic clones fighting and dying side by side against a common enemy neither of them had chosen, that Ahsoka felt something crystallize in the Force, not a plan exactly, but a certainty, the kind of clarity that sometimes arrived in the middle of chaos when every other consideration burned away except the truth of what needed to be done. Karensky. She fought her way toward his position, sabers a blur of deflected fire. "I need you to trust me on something." "I am rather occupied, Padawan." His mech's autocannon tore through another wave of droids even as he spoke, but something in his tone suggested he was listening regardless. "The droid command ship, the lead frigate directing this assault. If we can disable its command and control relay, the rest of the droid forces lose coordination. I've seen it happen before. Without centralized direction, battle droids default to basic combat protocols. It won't stop them, but it'll fracture their formations enough to even the numbers." "And how do you propose we reach a command frigate in orbit, in the middle of a ground assault?" "I don't." Ahsoka's mind was already racing ahead, piecing together a plan with the particular reckless clarity she'd inherited, whether she liked it or not, from her own master. "But Anakin's fighter squadron is already engaged against the frigates in orbit. If I can get a message through, coordinate a strike on the command relay while you hold the ground assault here. You wish to fight two battles at once, in two different theaters, with forces that have never before coordinated as a unified command." Karensky's mech pivoted, crushing a droideka beneath one massive foot even as he processed her proposal, with the same rapid tactical calculation he brought to everything. "It is an audacious plan, Padawan. Possibly a foolish one." "Probably both," Ahsoka admitted. "But it's the best chance we've got." There was a beat of silence over the comm, filled only by the roar of ongoing battle. And then Karensky's voice returned, carrying something that might have been, beneath the discipline of command, genuine respect. "Then let us be audacious together. Ravana, hold the ridge with the elemental units. I will trust the Padawan's instincts one more time, force-willing. They prove as sound in strategy as they have in combat." Ahsoka didn't wait to hear whether Ravana approved. She was already moving, reaching through the Force for the familiar, steady presence of her master, somewhere in the chaos of orbital combat above, hoping desperately that whatever plan she managed to coordinate in the next several minutes would prove equal to the devastating numbers bearing down on everyone she'd come to care about on this rapidly darkening battlefield. Reaching Anakin through the chaos of ground-to-orbit comm traffic took nearly 3 precious minutes, 3 minutes in which Ahsoka watched, through gaps in the smoke and weapons fire, clan warriors and Republic clones falling back in staggered formation, buying ground with blood and discipline against a droid tide that showed no sign of slowing. "Snips, I'm a little busy up here." Anakin's voice crackled through, punctuated by the whine of his fighter's engines pulling hard out of turn, "unless you've got something better than busy to offer me. The lead frigate, the one directing droid deployment. Take out its command relay, and you fracture their coordination planetside. I need maybe 90 seconds of chaos to help Karensky's forces consolidate before they're overrun." A beat of silence, filled with the distant thunder of proton torpedoes, finding their mark somewhere above the atmosphere. You're asking me to divert my entire squadron off primary target to save your new friends. I'm asking you to divert your squadron to save the entire ground engagement, clone troopers included, Ahsoka shot back, ducking beneath a blaster bolt and driving her saber through a battle droid's chassis in the same motion. Master, please. I know how this looks. I know what you think about all this. But right now, people are dying on both sides, and I need your help to stop that from getting worse. The silence that followed felt longer than it probably was. Then, diverting now. You'd better be right about this, Snips. I usually am, she said, with more confidence than she entirely felt, and cut the comm to focus on the battlefield collapsing around her. The strike, when it came, was almost beautiful in its violence. Anakin's squadron breaking hard from their engagement with screening vulture droids to punch straight through toward the lead frigate's exposed command tower. Proton torpedoes finding their mark in a bloom of orange fire that lit up the darkening sky above Baldemnik. The effect on the ground was immediate and dramatic. Droid formations that had been advancing with coordinated, almost organic precision suddenly fractured into disjointed clusters, some freezing mid-stride, others firing wildly without coherent target prioritization. Their central command relay severed, and their basic combat protocols left to fumble through the resulting chaos alone. Now, Kerensky's voice thundered across the clan command channel. Full advance. Do not let them recover coordination. What followed was less a battle than a rout. Clan battlemechs, freed from the burden of holding a defensive line against overwhelming numbers, surged forward with devastating effect. Lasers and autocannons tearing through droid formations that could no longer coordinate their own defense. Ahsoka fought at the edge of the advance, sabers flashing, feeling something that was not quite triumph, but close to it. The particular satisfaction of a desperate plan that had actually worked, bought at the cost of exhaustion and near misses, but paid for in the coin of lives, saved rather than lives lost. It was in the final minutes of the engagement, as the last scattered droid remnants either retreated or were cut down, that Anakin's fighter finally touched down near the smoking ruin of the hangar bay, and he emerged with the particular grim expression of a man who had done what was necessary, but wasn't yet certain how he felt about it. He found Ahsoka standing near Kerensky's mech, both of them bearing the marks of hard combat, and for a long moment father figure and apprentice simply looked at each other across the wreckage-strewn battlefield. That was a hell of a gamble, Anakin said finally. It worked. This time. He glanced past her toward Kerensky, who had emerged from his cockpit and was surveying the aftermath with the particular weary calculation of a commander tallying losses. Snips, I need to talk to you. Alone. She followed him a short distance from the others, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried none of the earlier grimness, only a kind of exhausted honesty she rarely heard from him. The Council's going to hear about this. All of it, the directive, your warning to the clans, this battle, everything. And Ahsoka, I don't think I can protect you from the consequences this time, not fully. This isn't a minor disciplinary matter anymore. You directly countermanded an emergency powers directive by warning a foreign power of Republic intentions. I know, she said quietly, and Palpatine's office is going to want answers about why a Jedi Padawan's actions led directly to Republic and clan forces coordinating a joint strike against a separatist assault. Answers that might not sit well with whatever narrative they intended to build about the clans being an unregistered hostile presence. He studied her face, searching for something she couldn't quite name. This battle just made it a lot harder for them to justify seizing clan technology by force. Grievous just did more to unite the Republic and the clans than any diplomatic effort could have managed in 90 days. Then maybe some good came out of all of this, Ahsoka said, even if it cost me. Anakin was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke again, his voice carried something that sounded almost like resignation, wrapped around an undercurrent of genuine pride he couldn't quite suppress. Whatever you decide about Kerensky's offer, about all of it, I need you to know something. I don't fully understand the path you're walking right now. Some of it scares me, if I'm honest. But I've never seen you fight with more conviction than you did today, and I don't think that conviction is coming from confusion, Snips. I think it's coming from clarity. That has to count for something. Behind them, Kerensky approached, his weathered face bearing fresh scars from the day's fighting. And when he spoke, his words carried the weight of a decision that had clearly been building since the battle's opening moments. Ahsoka Tano, whatever uncertainty remained in your heart before today, I suspect this battle has resolved a great deal of it. I ask again, with the added weight of blood shed side by side in genuine combat, will you accept provisional standing among Clan Wolf's stranded warriors? Not in place of your Jedi oath, but alongside it, should you find a way to reconcile both. Ahsoka looked between her master, weary, complicated, but unmistakably proud despite everything, and Kerensky, whose offer represented not an escape from the Jedi Order, but an expansion of everything she'd come to believe about honor, honesty, and the true cost of loyalty freely chosen rather than blindly demanded. Yes, she said, and felt the words settle into place with the particular rightness of a choice that had been building in her for weeks, finally spoken aloud. I accept. Behind Kerensky, unnoticed in the settling dust of battle, Star Captain Ravana watched the exchange with an expression that had shifted, somewhere in the chaos of shared combat, from grudging respect into something that looked almost like genuine acceptance. Though whether the rest of Clan Wolf's surviving warriors would extend her the same courtesy remained a question that the coming days would answer in ways none of them could yet predict. The victory at Baldemnik bought 3 weeks of uneasy calm, long enough for Ahsoka to complete her provisional trials among Clan Wolf survivors, long enough for the Republic Senate to quietly shelve the emergency powers directive rather than defend it publicly against a joint Republic-Clan engagement that had become, however inconveniently, a celebrated victory. But calm, in a galaxy at war, was never anything more than the pause between one crisis and the next, and this one arrived from a direction Ahsoka had not fully anticipated. From within the clans themselves, she felt the shift first in the Force, subtle but unmistakable. During a routine training session in the Baldemnik encampment, Kerensky had been summoned to a private council with his surviving officers, Ravana among them, along with the cluster's scientist and merchant caste representatives, whose voices, Ahsoka was learning, carried more weight in clan governance than outsiders typically assumed. She wasn't invited to that council. When Kerensky emerged from it, his expression carried a weight she hadn't seen on him since the day they'd first met. "What happened?" she asked, falling into step beside him as he crossed the encampment toward his quarters. "A vote," he said, "on the future course of this cluster's survival, and I did not win it as cleanly as I would have wished." The details, when he finally shared them, chilled her in a way the earlier Republic betrayal never quite had, because this betrayal, if it came, would come from people she had begun, against every expectation, to genuinely respect. A faction within the cluster, led by a star captain named Voss, whom Ahsoka had met only in passing, had grown restless with the scale of their ambitions. Stranded, resourceful, and increasingly aware of just how fractured and vulnerable this galaxy's warring factions actually were, Voss had proposed something far beyond mere survival. Full-scale conquest. Not a scattered raiding campaign, but a methodical clan-style invasion, seizing territory world by world, absorbing the Republic's own shattered infrastructure and clone manpower into a new clan hierarchy, ruling through the same rigid, trial-based warrior code that had governed clan society for centuries. "They believe," Kerensky said heavily, "that we have found, in this broken and desperate galaxy, an opportunity our own homeworlds could never offer us, a chance to forge something greater than a stranded scouting cluster. A new clan dominion, built from the ashes of a civilization too fractured by its own wars to resist us effectively. And you?" Ahsoka asked, though some part of her already dreaded the answer. "What do you believe?" "I believe," Kerensky said slowly, "that conquest without honor is no true clan tradition at all, whatever Voss and his supporters wish to claim. Our society was forged to preserve what remained of the Star League's ideals after its fall: discipline, honor, the pursuit of genetic and martial excellence in service of survival, not conquest for its own sake. But I would be lying if I told you the vote was close to unanimous in my favor. Too many of my warriors have watched this galaxy's own factions tear themselves apart through weakness, corruption, and division. They see in that weakness not a tragedy to be mourned, but an opportunity too significant to ignore. The next several days unfolded with the particular dread of a slow-motion catastrophe Ahsoka could see coming but couldn't fully prevent. Voss's faction grew bolder, staging what he called demonstrations of clan superiority, unsanctioned raids against isolated separatist outposts that, while tactically successful, violated every term of the accord the Republic had extended to the cluster. Republic Command, already wary after the directive scandal, began treating the clan encampment with renewed suspicion, exactly the outcome Ahsoka had fought so hard to prevent months earlier. She confronted Voss directly on the fourth day, finding him overseeing weapon calibrations on a trio of battle mechs prepped for what he termed a reconnaissance action that Ahsoka recognized immediately as preparation for a far larger operation. "This isn't reconnaissance," she said, planting herself in his path. "This is the opening move of an invasion, and you know it." Voss regarded her with open contempt, the particular disdain she'd learned to recognize from clan purists who considered her provisional status an insult to genuine clan tradition. "You have no standing to question cluster strategy, outsider. Your trial rights extend to combat and training, not command authority." "Maybe not by your rules," Ahsoka said, "but I earned enough respect from Star Colonel Van to speak plainly, and I'm telling you plainly, what you're planning will destroy everything he's built here. Every scrap of trust, every honest alliance, gone the moment you launch a full invasion against a galaxy that outnumbers your entire cluster 1,000 to 1. "We do not require numerical parity," Voss said coldly. "Clan warriors have never required it. Superior technology, superior discipline, superior genetics. These are the true measures of dominance, and this galaxy possesses none of them in sufficient quantity to resist a properly executed campaign." "This isn't your homeworld's rules of engagement," Ahsoka said, feeling something harden in her chest, the particular clarity that came whenever she recognized a line that could not be uncrossed once stepped over. "This galaxy has the Force, Voss. It has Jedi and Sith who can level a battlefield with abilities your sensors can't even measure. It has a Republic with more warships than your cluster could destroy in a decade, and a separatist alliance with resources to match. You will not conquer this galaxy. You will break it, and break your own people along with it." "Then perhaps," Voss said, "it is fortunate that the decision no longer rests with you, outsider, nor even fully with Star Colonel Van. The vote has been cast. The Council has authorized limited campaign preparations, pending final review." That final review came 2 days later, in the form of a trial of refusal, the most severe formal challenge within clan governance structure. Kerensky explained grimly, a ritualized combat contest through which a minority faction could challenge a council decision directly, staking the outcome on the honor and skill of chosen champions rather than continued political maneuvering. Voss had invoked it, confident in his faction's growing support, confident that a decisive combat victory would silence Kerensky's more cautious council permanently. "I will stand as Clan Wolf's champion against him," Kerensky told Ahsoka the night before the trial, his voice heavy with the weight of what defeat would mean. "But I will not lie to you about the stakes. Should Voss prevail, the cluster's course toward invasion becomes effectively unstoppable, sanctioned by trial, which our tradition holds nearly sacred. Should I prevail, his faction's momentum breaks, and we return to the path of careful, honest coexistence I have tried to build since our arrival. Let me fight beside you," Ahsoka said immediately, "or in your place, if that's what the trial allows." "It is not," Kerensky said. "The trial of refusal must be settled between full clan members and their designated champions. Your provisional status, however hard-earned, does not extend to this particular contest. I must face him alone, Ahsoka Tano. But I would ask something else of you, should events not unfold in my favor. Anything. If I fall and Voss's faction moves forward with full invasion preparations, I need you to do what you did once already, at great cost to yourself. Warn the Republic. Not out of betrayal to the ideals I still believe in, but because a war between an unrestrained clan faction and this entire galaxy would cost more lives, on both sides, than either of us could bear to witness silently. Some loyalties, Padawan, must extend beyond even the deepest bonds of found family and chosen honor. When the alternative is catastrophe, neither side can survive intact. Ahsoka felt the weight of that request settle over her like a physical thing. The recognition that she stood now not merely between two factions, but at the exact fulcrum point where the fate of an entire invasion, an entire war, an entire galaxy's uneasy peace, might ultimately turn on a single ritual combat, and the choices that followed it, whichever way that combat resolved. "I understand," she said quietly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I won't let this galaxy burn because I was too afraid to choose honestly, even when honesty costs everything." Karensky studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his weathered features. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried the particular gravity of a man preparing to stake everything he'd built on a single, uncertain contest. "Then let us hope, Ahsoka Tano, that honor still counts for something in whatever comes next, for both our people's sakes." Dawn broke gray and cold over Baldemnic's rocky plain, and the entire cluster gathered in the wide Circle Clan tradition demanded for a trial of refusal. Warriors, technicians, scientist caste researchers, all standing witness to a contest that would determine whether their stranded people walked the path of conquest or the harder, slower road of honest coexistence. Ahsoka stood at the circle's edge beside Rex, and a contingent of clone troopers Anakin had insisted accompany her, his own fighter holding position in low orbit should the outcome demand Republic intervention. Karensky and Voss faced each other in full battle mech configuration, the ritual's severity demanding weapons rather than the lighter elemental armor of lesser trials. Ravana served as arbiter once more, her voice carrying none of her old contempt now, only the solemn weight of a warrior who understood exactly what hung on this single contest. "Trial of refusal, sanctioned by full council vote," she announced, her words carrying across the plain to every gathered warrior. "Combat to submission, incapacitation, or yield. The outcome binds the cluster's course absolutely, by ancient and unbroken tradition. Do both combatants accept these terms?" "Accepted," Karensky said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what rested on the coming minutes. "Accepted," Voss echoed, and something in his tone carried the confidence of a warrior who had trained specifically ruthlessly for exactly this moment, who had, Ahsoka suspected, been preparing for this contest since long before he'd ever voiced his ambitions aloud. Ravana raised her hand, held it a beat longer than strictly necessary, then let it fall. "Begin." Voss moved first and moved hard, his opening assault a coordinated barrage of laser fire and missile volleys that drove Karensky backward across the crystalline ground, armor scoring and smoking under the sustained punishment. Ahsoka watched from the circle's edge, every muscle tensed, feeling the force ripple with the particular violence of the contest, not dark exactly, but sharp, urgent, freighted with consequence in a way few battles she'd witnessed ever had been. This was not combat for territory or tactical advantage. This was combat for the soul of an entire stranded civilization, and every warrior watching understood it in their bones. "He's overextending," she murmured to Rex, who stood beside her with his blaster held loose but ready, watching the contest with the professional attention of a soldier assessing an unfamiliar style of warfare. "Karensky's letting him burn through his aggression." "You sure about that, Commander?" "Because from where I'm standing, the old man's taking one hell of a beating." She was sure, or told herself she was, though watching Karensky's mech stagger under another punishing exchange tested that certainty more than she wanted to admit. Voss fought with the calculated brutality of a warrior who had spent years anticipating this exact contest, pressing every advantage, denying Karensky the room to breathe or reset that the older commander's more measured style depended upon. Twice, Voss's autocannon found gaps in Karensky's defensive positioning, each impact sending shudders through the older machine's frame that Ahsoka felt echo through the crowd's collective silence. But Karensky had survived 20 years of combat that predated Voss's own military career, and experience, Ahsoka was learning, carried its own particular weight in a contest like this, not the flashy dominance of youth and aggression, but the patient, accumulated wisdom of a warrior who had learned exactly how much punishment his own machine could absorb, and exactly how long an opponent's aggression could be sustained before it began, inevitably, to fray at the edges. The turning point came at the 18-minute mark, when Voss committed to a full frontal charge meant to end the contest decisively. The kind of overwhelming, close-range assault that had likely ended every prior trial he'd fought in his rise through Clan Wolf's ranks. Kerensky did not retreat from it. Instead, at the last possible instant, he pivoted his machine's weight onto its damaged left leg actuator, absorbing the charge's initial impact at an angle that redirected Voss's momentum past him rather than through him. And in the half-second window that opened as Voss's mech overextended past its intended target, Kerensky struck. The blow was not flashy. It was precise, a single concentrated laser burst directed not at armor plating, which both machines had already demonstrated could absorb tremendous punishment, but at the narrow, exposed seam where Voss's cockpit shielding met the machine's primary weapons conduit. The strike tore through with devastating effect, Voss's weapons systems dying in a shower of sparks. His machine's balance systems fighting uselessly to compensate for the sudden loss of the counterweight his primary armaments had provided. Voss's mech dropped to one knee, weapons dark, armor scorched and smoking, and for a long, breathless moment, the entire circle held its silence, waiting. "Yield," Ravana called, her voice carrying clearly across the plain, or face incapacitating force. The pause that followed stretched long enough that Ahsoka found herself holding her breath, watching the ruined machine kneel motionless in the crystalline dust, wondering whether Voss's pride would override his tactical judgment entirely. Then, through gritted static, came the answer that would determine the course of an entire galaxy's near future. "I yield." The words landed across the gathered cluster like a physical release, tension breaking into the low murmur of hundreds of warriors processing an outcome that would reshape their entire community's trajectory. Kerensky's mech straightened slowly, venting excess heat into the cold morning air, and when he spoke, his voice carried more exhaustion than triumph. "The Council's course is set, by trial and tradition both. This cluster does not walk the path of conquest. We will find our place in this galaxy through honor, and through honest alliance, not through the ashes of a war we did not choose and would not survive intact." The weeks that followed tested that verdict in smaller, quieter ways than the dramatic clash of the trial itself. Voss's faction dispersed gradually, not through punishment or exile, but through the slower mechanics of a warrior culture processing genuine defeat. Some among his supporters accepted the outcome with the grudging honor clan tradition demanded, folding back into the cluster's broader command structure with wounded pride but unbroken loyalty. Others requested transfer to whatever independent operations the cluster's limited resources could support, unwilling to fully abandon ambitions the trial had only formally, not personally, extinguished. Voss himself vanished from the encampment within the month, taking a small handful of loyalists with him toward the outer rim's less governed fringes. Not an enemy, exactly, Kerensky cautioned Ahsoka, but not fully at peace with the cluster's chosen direction either. A loose thread that might yet resurface in ways none of them could presently predict. Ahsoka watched all of it unfold with the particular clarity that came from having stood, however briefly, at the exact center of a crisis whose resolution had ultimately rested on people other than herself, on Kerensky's hard-won experience, on the tradition that bound clan honor tighter than any written law, on the willingness of an entire warrior culture to accept a verdict that many of them had not personally wanted. It was, she reflected, a strange kind of lesson in humility, that even the most careful, principled intervention could only carry a crisis so far before the outcome had to rest in hands other than her own. "You did not fight today," Kerensky told her that evening, finding her at the encampment's edge, watching the twin suns set over Baldemnik's rocky horizon. "And yet, I suspect the outcome would not have unfolded as it did without everything you set in motion these past months. The warning about the directive, the trust you extended when trust cost you standing within your own order, the example of honesty you brought to a people who had little reason to expect it from strangers." He settled beside her, armor still bearing fresh scars from the morning's contest. "Voss was not wrong that this galaxy is vulnerable, Ahsoka Tano. He was wrong only in believing that vulnerability was an invitation to conquest, rather than a reason for the strong to extend protection to those who have not yet learned to protect themselves. "Is that what you believe now?" she asked. "That the clans have a role here, beyond simple survival?" "I believe," Kerensky said slowly, "that we have found, in this fractured and desperate galaxy, something our own homeworlds had long since lost, the chance to prove that honor and strength need not serve conquest alone. Whether that proves true in the years ahead, only time and further trial will tell." He looked toward her, something warm beneath the weathered composure. "But I am glad, whatever comes next, that you chose to walk this path beside us rather than simply observing it from a careful distance." Ahsoka said nothing for a long moment, watching the light fade over a world that had nearly become the opening battlefield of a war neither galaxy would have survived intact. "So am I," she finally said. "So am I." The Clone Wars raged on beyond Baldemnik, indifferent to the quiet crisis that had nearly reshaped its course. Somewhere across 1,000 other systems, clone troopers and battle droids continued their grim arithmetic of attrition, and the machinery of Palpatine's slow consolidation of power ground forward, mostly unnoticed, beneath the war's louder distractions. But on that rocky, unremarkable world, something genuinely new had taken root. Not an invasion, not a conquest, but a fragile, hard-won understanding between two peoples who had nearly destroyed each other through fear, misunderstanding, and the manufactured lies of a government more interested in advantage than honesty. Ahsoka Tano returned to her duties beside Anakin Skywalker, changed in ways neither of them could fully articulate, carrying provisional standing among a warrior people whose code of honesty had taught her something the Jedi Order's careful philosophy had never quite managed to. That trust, freely given and honestly earned, could bridge divides no amount of political calculation ever could. She had not abandoned the Jedi. She had not fully become a clan warrior either. She had found, instead, a narrower path between both, one defined not by the institution she served, but by the convictions she refused to compromise, regardless of what either side ultimately demanded of her. Karen Skivan's cluster remained a strange and singular presence within Republic space, neither fully integrated nor fully independent, a standing reminder that not every crisis this galaxy faced would arrive with the familiar shape of separatist droids or Sith manipulation. Some threats, and some allies, would come from further away than anyone had ever imagined possible, testing not just the galaxy's military strength, but its willingness to extend good faith to strangers who had earned it through deed rather than birthright or blind assumption. Whether that fragile peace would hold as the war ground on, as Palpatine's shadow lengthened, and as Vasa's scattered loyalists drifted somewhere in the outer rim's ungoverned arc, no one could yet say for certain. But for Ahsoka, standing once more beside her master beneath Coruscant's endless traffic and deeper uncertainties, one truth remained unshaken: honor, honestly chosen and honestly kept, could withstand even a galaxy at war with itself. And sometimes, that was enough to build a future worth fighting for.